Hi, Joel. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's an
Yeah, you're
absolute
welcome.
pleasure. I guess just to kick us off, can you tell us a little bit about your role at First Advantage?
Yeah, sure. I'm the vice president of global talent management and human resources. So, what we've done in the past is we've really run a lot of these big learning and development programs and succession planning programs and all of that type of work globally. That's being transitioned and is working through into a new individual now. I'm also the HR business partner for what we call our customer experience organization, which for us is technology. That's infrastructure, product, and product development. So I've been with First Advantage for about 4 years. We're a background screening company.
Okay, perfect. So I guess to tie it back into, what the candidates are interested about, when you're looking at resumes or looking to hire someone, what's the first thing that
Mhm.
you look at?
I mean, the very first thing is proven relevant skill sets. I mean, we have our job spec, we know what we're looking for, and we need to be able to very quickly and easily understand from that resume that we receive whether or not that person meets our minimum qualifications at a bare minimum. That's really what we look for first thing hiring tech talent. We're looking for keywords. We're looking for the languages they know, the programs that they've learned and that they've actually used. And then sometimes it's even relevant what version of that program that they've used. For instance, if it's Angular JS versus Angular 7, it's a big difference. We can't, if we're looking for somebody with Angular 7, we can't hire somebody with Angular JS only. So it's just important for us to understand whether or not they have those relevant skill sets. And then, we'll dive deeper into what they've actually done with them.
Absolutely. So when
Mhm.
someone makes it past the initial screening, what stands out to you in an interview?
Yeah. So, what really stands out to me when I'm interviewing is if a candidate can tell me not just what they do, like and how they do it, but I want to understand if they know why they're doing it. The user empathy piece. That's for me one of the most critical pieces when I'm looking for a good, particularly technology candidate, because you do get candidates who will just talk for ages about all the technology that they know, and then really detailed specifics on how they set up a database and everything. And that's great. It's important to understand that you do have really great technology background and a good understanding of what you're doing. But why did you do it like that? What problem were you trying to solve? Who were your end users that you were trying to create this solution for? That's what I want to understand. And for me, that's a big standout if a candidate can tell me that, especially without me asking. That's ideal.
So candidates are always told, ask questions at the ends of interviews. So
Mm,
that way, you seem like you really know what the company does and things like that. Are
yeah.
there questions that you've been asked that really stood out to you that candidates asked?
Yeah, I mean, there's not like specific questions, but if they're asking questions that really show me that they're interested and they did some homework, that would be important for me. Yeah, what I've seen actually fairly recently in a lot of the candidates that we've been interviewing for particularly full stack engineering roles, they'll go and they'll actually do research about me as an interviewer because they know who I am. Off of the interview schedule, they'll go and I could see they're researching me on LinkedIn. I can see it in my who's viewed your profile, and they'll ask me questions about programs that we've built. For me, I think that's important because it shows me that they're curious and that they're not just necessarily just looking for a job. They're interested in First Advantage, telling me, asking specifics about maybe some articles that they've seen or some products that they read about on our website, or even like going to Glassdoor and saying, hey, well, I read this stuff about First Advantage. Tell me a little bit about what's driving some of those comments. I appreciate that a lot. And I know that a lot of our hiring managers do as well, because it just shows us that they care. We want people, we won't hire you if we don't think that you care. Or like I said earlier, you don't understand why you're doing what you do, or you're not interested. So we're really looking for kind of that well-rounded individual who's very curious.
Yeah, just looking past the just what's on your resume, really looking into who's going to be excited to show up to work every day.
Exactly, exactly.
And then are there any interviewing myths that you would like to see debunked?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot, but one that particularly bothers me is, when people think that just because they have a relevant skill set and they might be good with that skill set, that people a lot of times believe that that's what the decision is made on. I'm really great at XYZ. There's no reason why you shouldn't hire me. But like I've said earlier, the skills that you have like on your resume or you've got on your LinkedIn profile, those are important. They get you in the door, but we need to make sure that we're interviewing you, and we do, at least at First Advantage and the teams that I'm working with. We interview you for competencies, both behavioral and skill based. Right, skill based is critical. You can't get in the door without that. But we are going to see whether or not you, for First Advantage particularly, you work well as a team, or you're good at collaboration. What I like to see is, if somebody is doing their homework and they see that a lot, your company values are collaboration, accountability, and empowerment, things like that, which is listed on most companies'
Mhm.
websites if you go and look. you know we want to know whether or not, for us, you are a good collaborative engineer. So if you're somebody who struggles working with others, you probably won't be a good fit. Even though you might be really technically skilled, you might not be a good fit for us.
Mhm.
So I would say, as an interviewee, you need to be able to anticipate those kinds of questions and be honest. If you don't work well in a team, you don't put yourself in the position where you're going to have to work well as a team, because that's
Mhm.
going to make it really difficult for you, unless you're really willing to learn, and you're able to be really flexible. But it's all about kind of feeling out that individual, as well as them feeling out our company, the interviewers. But I just, that is a little bit of a pet peeve for me, is thinking that just because you have a skill set that you should be hired. Skill sets are critical, but you also have to have those behavioral competencies as well, and be able to show us through, questions that tell us how you've done it, show us how you can work well as a team, or take accountability for whatever it might be.
Absolutely. You want to make sure it's a good culture fit. So that way, if you do start at the job, you're not, wanting to be solo on a very collaborative team and being
Right.
sorely disappointed. That would not
Right.
be
Exactly.
beneficial for anyone.
Exactly.
Um, and then if someone's just now starting to think about maybe transitioning to a new role, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, especially these days, I mean, like, we're most everybody's working remote, right?
Hmm.
um, your resume is your absolute first impression, and it has to draw that recruiter's eyes, because if it doesn't, you know depending on what survey you read, a resume will be looked at for between 6 and 30 seconds, right? And if
Yes.
you've if you've got a 7-page resume and it's single spaced, and I can't read that, and I'm not going to spend my time on that.
Yes. It's
And
like a
that's
word search.
Eh, no, thank you. Like, it needs to be attractive enough to where, it's not difficult to look at. It needs to be really relevant to the role. It needs to I want to make sure, at least for the resumes that I'm reading, that I can see why you're a good fit for this job. I don't care necessarily that you have 2 pages worth of work that you did at one job. That's awesome that you did that, but is that relevant for me to know? So, avoiding more than 2 pages on your resumes, having too much crazy wording, or a lot of acronyms that aren't necessarily understood outside of a particular company. That's also difficult. We don't know what those mean.
Hmm.
If your resume is kind of hard to see where one job starts and another job ends, and if there's a lot of spelling, grammar issues, or irrelevant information, like you love swimming and stuff, like that stuff's just not important, and just it needs to just be easy, and spend some time on it. I mean, you can go on Upwork and pay
Hmm.
$50 for somebody to write you a absolutely smashing resume, and it's probably going to be worth it, if especially if you're starting out, just
Yeah.
early on in your job search.
That's a great point. I feel like there's so much stuff that you can delegate out with doing things like Upwork, where you can let the people that are great at it do it and focus
Exactly,
on what you're
exactly.
good at. Because, yeah, definitely having typos in your resume is never very becoming on the
No.
person.
Yeah.
Uh, and then, do you have advice that you would give yourself, like 25-year-old self?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would probably tell myself that the skills that I was learning at 25 years old, where I was working as an HR generalist, um, that they really and truly were still going to be informing the decisions that I made 11 years later. Like now, I'm
Really?
still, oh yeah, like I'm still consistently referring back to what I used to do in HR shared services, where I started out, with a larger company in HR. Actually, I think that's where I was 10 years ago, as HR shared services. But I still refer back to that, and I still try to, work on process improvements like I did 10, 12 years ago. And it's something that, you think that when you get to a higher level, you won't have to do that kind of stuff anymore. But I enjoy that stuff, and it's something that, I try as much as I can to help others learn through my experience, so they don't have to learn the hard way like I did in a lot of my roles. I'd also probably tell myself to buy a whole bunch of Bitcoin at that point too, but
Yeah,
other than that,
that time machine would have been very, very like
that would have been
lucrative.
that would have been pretty awesome. But yeah, I would say just that making the right decisions is going to drive your career, and you're going to have to refer back to what you've done, and what you've done is what you've done, and so that's what your experience is, and that's what you're going to be able to rely on in the future.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you read so many articles talking about how the workforce has changed so much and everything's evolving. That's
Hmm.
interesting that you still pull on your experience so much
Oh
because
yeah.
when you start reading articles, it seems like things are changing at such a rapid pace. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say too, it's true. Like things are changing. It's in the HR space, not just technology. Things are changing rapidly every single year. Things are a
Hmm.
little differently, especially this year with COVID. But it's what you've done doesn't become irrelevant, because you've learned through experience. Since it was in the past, it was probably more difficult to get done because you didn't have as good a technology as you do now. It's just important to realize that understanding it really well and making the right decisions in your job where you're at will continue to inform how you interact with your customers, or they're going to, what decisions you're going to make on your career path in the future.
Absolutely. So I guess like moving back to the software space a little bit,
Mhm.
what languages would you say are best to know?
I mean, so when talking about languages, it really depends on what you're looking to do, obviously. So,
Hmm.
when we have a huge need for full stack engineers, and that's really a big deal out there, is getting people with that front end, that back end. And that's a tough skill set to find combined, right? So
Hmm.
somebody might be really strong in the front end and a little bit, lighter in the back end, or really strong in the back end and a little bit lighter on the front end. But if you are looking to have that kind of dynamic in your skill set, TypeScript, JavaScript for front end, and then Java, C Sharp, Python for the back end. I mean, those are from what I've seen, that's really what we're consistently looking for with our programming languages. And the versions that people are using, as we said earlier, are important too. So consistently trying to upskill the versions of the software that you're using, or of the program that you're trying to use, is really really important. So for instance, like I said earlier, Java, or sorry, Angular 7, we've had to lower our requirement from Angular 7 to Angular 4, because the languages or the program is similar enough, but
Hmm.
below Angular 4, we can't hire people with that experience because it's not relevant to what we do, even though it's Angular, it's Angular JS, right? So, keeping really relevant on the current programming programs, as
Hmm.
well as those languages, is critical, and making those easily viewable and pinpointable on your resume, so that recruiter can see it in 6 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Definitely keeping up with the newest versions because it's definitely always changing with the different languages and
Yeah.
yeah. And then my final question, if you could step into my shoes and ask yourself any question that I did not ask you, what would you ask
Mm.
yourself?
I would probably ask myself, what challenges have you found with the recent and frankly rapid introduction to a fully virtual interview process? That wasn't something that we were prepared for, like at
Hmm.
all, when COVID hit. And so when March hit, we First Advantage basically sent everybody home, but and we weren't really hiring for a little while, so we had some time to kind of get things up and running. We were using Teams, but we weren't like really using it for a lot. But we had about 2 months where we were starting to get used to the technologies and making sure that we knew what worked well, and we were all getting our systems set up at home. As you can see, I'm obviously at home. um,
I'm at home as well, so.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, the challenges that we faced, as HR professionals, trying to ensure that these people that we're interviewing were interviewed well, and that it was still an experience that can really be engaging and get people excited to start
Mhm.
with you. It was hard, and it took some real getting used to, and not just for HR, but for our hiring managers as well, because I before this, I never would have hired someone that nobody met in person, and
Mhm.
I'd never really done that before, and now that is the norm. So,
Yes.
the challenges really are making sure that you're not only interviewing well, like you have a really well structured interview process, and that you are getting that candidate excited about joining your company when they haven't met a soul in person from your company. So
Yeah.
it was tough, but we've been able to hire a lot of people, and a lot of really great people through COVID, and ongoing. We plan on having a good deal more technologists hired on at First Advantage too. So we've been able to really adapt to it, and also while we're doing that, um, keeping ourselves or keeping our process well defined enough and strict enough that we were able to really promote diversity and inclusion as well in technology, which has been a huge deal for us this year.
That's wonderful. I'm sure even what seems to be simple parts of the hiring process, like getting a company computer to someone, was even an
Uh,
adventure.
yeah, I mean, we've got a bunch of stories of uh, you know, people in the Philippines from the office getting in jeepneys and bringing laptops to people's homes across Manila. Same
Oh
thing
my
in
goodness.
in India. So it was quite harrowing, and our infrastructure teams killed it. They did a fantastic job getting everybody set up as quickly as they could with as many laptops as possible. And some desktops as well, but try to get people set up as quickly as possible, having limited people in the office. It's been a huge growing experience, not just for HR, but for everybody at First Advantage. So
Yes, I feel like everybody is so much smarter and stronger after the last year. So I think we can all
right.
agree we've learned so much. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me. I feel like I've learned so much about the hiring process and really what you look for in interviews. So thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome. I appreciate the time.
Bye bye.
Bye.